Welcome, everybody, to another exciting panel presented by BMI and White Bear PR. Today, we're talking about video game music, the incredible scores that go into some of your favorite video games. With us today, we have Christopher Tin, composer of Civilization, Nami Melumad, composer of Medal of Honor, Ilan Eshkeri, composer of Ghost of Tsushima, Inon Zur, composer of Fallout series, and Bobby Tahouri, composer of Marvel's Avengers. Now, welcome, everybody. Natalie, why don't you take us from here?
For sure. Thank you, Chandler. First of all, a question for Christopher Tin. Your choral piece, Baba Yetu, from the Firaxis game Civilization 4 became the first piece of video game music ever to win a Grammy Award in 2011. What was it like to accept that award, and how has that accomplishment influenced the video game music industry at large?
Well, it was an amazing experience. I mean, I was really honored, actually. And, part of you feels a little undeserving about it as well, given the history of music and video games and a lot of the amazing scores that preceded mine. It was a wonderful moment. And actually, I made very sure to acknowledge that fact. It's the first thing I said on stage after thanking my parents and my girlfriend, that game music, should be accepted more by the broader general public. That this was kind of a historic nomination, and hopefully it would bring more attention to the fact that my colleagues, many of whom are sitting here on this call, we're cranking out pretty good music, right? That deserves recognition on its own. So I mean, hopefully that was a bit of a wake-up call to the Grammy voting body, but also to the general public that, hey, great music is being written for games.
Absolutely.
Nami, congrats on your recent Film Music Critic Association Award. You won for Best Original Score for a Video Game and Interactive Media for Medal of Honor Above and Beyond. So hooray.
Thank you.
You scored that with Michael Giacchino, who you've collaborated with a lot. What's that collaboration process like, and how does it differ for when you guys are working on a film and a game?
So basically, so far what we have been doing is that Michael usually writes the main themes, and then he kind of hands it to me, and I pretty much run with it. And so it's actually been the same process with Pickle and with this, in that, like, he really just gives me the freedom to do what I think is right. Obviously, he does direct me from time to time, but it's really been wonderful to learn from him, both about like visual, like how do you connect in movies? How do you connect what's happening on screen to the visual? Because that's what he's just incredible with that. Just as a storyteller, just simply incredible. And then also with video games, like how do you connect the characters, like what's happening on in that level, in that mission, to the music. And so I think with Medal of Honor, the main idea was to connect between the previous installments of the series, where he had done like a lot of great work, and so sort of to connect that so that emotionally the people who have played these games before will experience that connection. So yeah, that was really fun to do.
Yeah, how did you meet Michael? I can imagine so many composers would have loved to work with him. So talk a little bit about that.
It's actually via my agent. Like she's Maria Machado at GSA. She's also Michael's agent. And a couple years back, I pitched for American Pickle. And they actually wanted to work with Michael because they have a previous relationship with him. He had scored a lot of Seth Rogen's movies. And so the collaboration was their idea that, like, we'll do it together. And all of a sudden, I get this call from Maria, and she's like, well, Michael's also on the line. And I'm like, what? Is this my birthday? And he was like, yes, it's your birthday. Happy birthday. I just wanted to wish you happy birthday, and also ask if you want to work with me on an American Pickle. And from the get-go, it was just like a really good click, both musically and personally. So it just worked out. I don't know, I'm really lucky.
That's so awesome. And a question for Inon. I don't know how much you can talk about this, but I know you've got an exciting project coming up. Can you share anything about Outriders and the music that you made for that?
Well, okay. So Outriders, actually, I think I'm working already close to 3.5 years on. But most of the games that I'm working on, like, for example, the Fallout series or the Dragon Age series, these are all games that, starting about like 4 years before. Like, for example, Fallout 4 was out in 2016. I started in 2012. 76 are the same. And obviously, this is basically how long does it takes to develop these kind of huge, massive video games. Outriders is a very, very different game, than what I'm used to do. I cannot really talk a lot about the game, but the actual music tends to be way more electronic and sound designish. The way I actually brought it in is that we've recorded pretty big orchestra in Budapest, but then I took basically what we've recorded and basically screwed it up in many ways. This is so basically, the score for Outriders is a mashup between electronic orchestra and orchestra that got electronic. So it's going to be very, very interesting. Also, one thing about Outriders, again, I cannot talk a lot about the game, but this is a franchise that just beginning. I've been throughout my life, I've been very fortunate to start a franchise and then keep on going. For example, Dragon Age, I started, and other projects like that, and some others that I cannot really talk yet. I'm starting. So the whole discovery of what is the right tone, what are the right themes, what we could do with this just takes so much time. But it was definitely a very, very rewarding, experience, and I've learned so much about it.
Well, one of my favorite games of recent past is Ghost of Tsushima. It's my backdrop right now. This is the Golden Temple. And Ilan Eshkeri, I'm just curious about your process of studying the traditional Japanese instruments that are used in the score. How did you go about preparing for such an epic game like this?
It was certainly very challenging. The game makers had an ambition towards making every aspect of the game as authentic as possible. They went as far as going to the island of Tsushima and getting leaves from the island so that they could replicate them accurately in the game, which was incredible, inspiring, but a little daunting. And they wanted to do the same thing with the music. So I'd written music before that had Japanese influence, but the idea behind this was to really make the Japanese instruments the central idea, and so I had to sit down and read about it and learn about it, and I did. I spent weeks, months learning about it, but only just enough to know how much I don't know, because it's an enormous undertaking. You have to learn a whole culture worth of music and why, and that's impossible to do. That would take a lifetime. So the musicians were very patient with me, and they taught me a lot, and I learned the scales, and I found a professor at a university who was also very patient and talked to me about it. And then once I had all that knowledge, I was able to learn to write for the instruments in a way that was a little more naturalistic, and then write for the orchestra in a way that sat well with those instruments and with the tonality of Japanese music. There isn't really a system of chords in that traditional Japanese music, so I had to create systems of chords out of the pentatonic scales. So it was very involved. But then, as was just being said about screwing things up, I then, there were times in the score where I'd just throw that rule book straight out the window and do something else, because what's the point in a rule if you can't break it from time to time?
Absolutely. Wow, that sounds fascinating. And question for Bobby. Were you familiar with the Marvel Avengers characters before starting on the game? And how did you study and prepare for everything?
Yeah, of course. I mean, Marvel's been huge, especially, since the past 15 years or so, with all the films and then the TV series. But sure, growing up, I was definitely aware of Spider-Man and Spider-Man was my favorite when I was a little kid. But yes, I when I was hired to work on this, I definitely dove into each character and started reading up on each character and what their attributes were and all their superhero powers, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah.
Kind of continuing on Marvel's Avengers, I was reading about how you use certain instruments for each of the heroes. Mm-hmm. Can you kind of break down which hero got what instrument and why did you choose it for them?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, let's see. Well, let's go with Tony Stark. He's a rock star to us. When we were working on the game, we just figured he's gonna listen to 80s metal music or 70s, 80s metal music, or so he's gonna just definitely have guitar or bass influence. So that was, we immediately thought, okay, Tony, electric guitar and bass. And then Bruce Banner, Hulk, to match his scientific mind as Bruce, we figured why not give him cello, because he would listen to Baroque cello music. And then when he turns into the Hulk, just give him big taikos and big guttural brass and full orchestral expression. Who else? Thor, we gotta do, anvil. I mean, I'm sorry to be on the nose, but that makes sense. And he's also a rock star too, so he gets some guitars as well.
Isn't there a Mahler hammer?
There's a Mahler hammer. I wish I could find one recorded. And who else? Kamala, the one superhero, Miss Marvel that we don't know much about. I just gave her, for whatever reason, an electric piano that was just distorted here and there and run through delays and just percolating, just to kind of hopefully give the sense that she's struggling with realizing that she's a superhero, or she has these powers. She's just a kid from New Jersey, and she goes on this huge adventure. So I try to dive into the more psychological aspect of her character, try to be subtle. But then, of course, when she turns to Miss Marvel and we can see what she can do. And again, I love brass. I love orchestral instruments, just long brass notes, bending notes, string notes that bend. And as far as whenever she reaches out her arms and her limbs, they bend to match her movements. And who else? A couple other characters. Oh, Captain America, got to go trumpet. Got to go with orchestral, just straight orchestra with trumpet. Why not? And I think, and there's a couple other characters, but I can't talk about them yet. So,
can I jump in and speaking of Mahler hammers and anvils and things like that, I once tried to record the Mahler hammer. I think also known as the Hammerschlang or something like that in the scores. But it didn't. It's one of those things that's really so huge, it's extremely difficult to record. So it just,
You feel it more than you can.
there was so much anticipation. We recorded it and it just sounded like bing. It was terrible. When you record the smaller things and really amplify them, they sound huge. But you try to record like a really enormous thing, it often just doesn't work. Recording organ, that's really difficult to make it sound big and overwhelming like it does in real life.
Those Mahler hammers are very impressive live to watch the musician wield it.
Yeah, exactly. Much better. That's my top tip. Much better live than in a recording studio.
But by the way, it also true to like the biggest, hugest taikos. You know, sometimes you'll record these like whatever 1 kilometer, you know, taiko, and you'll hit it, and it sounds huge. Then you go to your studio, and then you hear like bang, you know. So it just really depends on how you record them, with which microphones, positions, and also obviously and most importantly in what kind of a room you record it in, because you need to have big enough room to, you know, accommodate all the, you know, these amazing, you know, frequencies that this thing produces. So it's just not enough to get the actual instrument. Also, you need to have like the right room, the right microphones, the right people to do these like, amazing instruments.
I couldn't agree more. We recorded taikos in Japan for Ghost of Tsushima, and it was when I went out onto the studio floor to hear these 16 guys playing, it was one of the loudest, biggest walls of sound. It physically shook my bones. It was really beyond really memorable experience. It was really extraordinary, but there's no way to really capture that, especially, you know, on its own. Perhaps there's a way to capture it, but like when you start putting that in with orchestra and all these other things, the balance of those things, it's sometimes very hard to capture what that experience is, to hear those things live.
Mm-hmm.
I think, you know, the other thing with taiko ensembles is so much of it is also the visual component of how they play as well. And if you see a group like Koto, I mean, it's just a feat of superhuman strength and endurance. You know, they play these giant odaiko standing up for like 3 hours straight, right? I mean, it's just a physicality that really does not translate on the recorded side very well. And then you have all the kakagoi too, you know, like the hoot and the hut and the sore and all that sort of stuff too. That, you know, it really adds to the live taiko experience, but it just cannot, you know, you probably can't stick it on your score anywhere, you know?
You know what? Another funny experience I had, because I wanted to record some of the taiko chants that you were just doing so great there, but of course I had no idea you know, how to particularly use the words, and mostly it was okay, but then they did one track where they got halfway through it and they just all fell about laughing, and apparently I'd put 3 syllables together that sounded like something really Japanese. So there you go. That's how you can learn to write for something, but when you culturally don't understand what you're doing, you could run into trouble.
I'll say this, going back to the point about it being really hard to record taiko, the last time I ever tried to record taiko, we got so desperate that we even tried the old trick where you take like basically an old speaker cone and wire that up as your microphone, you know, as like a really, really large diaphragm microphone, shoved it under the drum to try to get the sound that way. Still couldn't get it right. I mean, you know, the taiko sound that we know is really kind of a sampled process sound, you know, the sound that you hear on film scores and things like that. The actual taiko sound, I mean, it varies so much whether you're, you know, a foot away or 10 feet or 100 feet away, right? But it's a very different, brighter sound that involves much more of the skin head. And especially if the drums are tuned tightly, which is what they're supposed to be, it doesn't actually sound like the cinematic taiko that we hear on soundtracks. Those actually sound like out of tune taikos in a way.
Right.
Oh, wow. That is so interesting. Are there other instruments like that, you know, sound better than when they're created synthetically as opposed to real live?
I would say, for example, that and it's a very simple instrument. It's a timpani. And timpani is such a, like, I mean, you see it everywhere. And once you basically, in the, like in a concert, it sounds so great. But what you sometimes don't get is when a timpani plays with an orchestra, basically the whole orchestra gets its sound and sort of like absorbs its sounds and spew back whatever it is. So it becomes part of the sound. When a timpani hit, it's resonating with the strings, it's resonating with the brass, resonating with everything. Once you took it out and just put it in a room and hit the timp, you don't get anything even close to what you really hear in the recording. So what they do, like the pros, what they do, and this is why in some cases, yes, I admit, I will record the whole thing live, but sometimes just for the timpani, I will enhance it with some pre-sampled timpanis. What basically the pros are doing, at first they're choosing the room, then they're actually sampling only the ambient of the room itself. And only then they record the timpani and then record and mash together the ambient of the room and anything in the room, everything in the room with a timpani. And this is how you get this amazing sound. And it's really, really hard to do. Just you could just bring it the most amazing timpani to your little studio here and have him or her, hitting stuff. It will be amazing playing, but the actual sound, this is where, the problem starts.
I agree. A solution for me, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think, timpani is often seen as quite a simple instrument, but it's really quite complex in the way it interacts with the orchestra is complex. I always like to think of it because as we have asked to record things being split out more and more, which is now just the normal way of things, I like to not think of the timpani as percussion and think of it in the old school way, like Mozart would have thought of it as part of the brass section, because he didn't have trombones and tubas, so
or a bass.
Right. So it used to be the low end in that way. So I typically always record my timpani with brass. And so it at least get some of the effect that you're talking about. And then I think of the percussion as a separate thing to that.
Exactly.
Wow, that's fascinating.
Well, that's why if you look on an orchestral stave, that's why the percussion goes underneath the brass, because the timpani went underneath the brass because it was originally part of the brass section.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, I'm learning a lot. You guys are very smart as well as talented. And Christopher, back to you, because you've got, an interesting career as well as your video game work. You also write a lot of orchestral and choral concert pieces. How does your creative process differ with creating a concert piece versus a video game?
Well,
I know that's a big question. I don't know.
I mean, like,
yeah, completely.
One is meant to be a piece. A concert music is meant to be a piece of music that stands on its own musical merits, right? It's independent of any sort of story or drama or scene or dialogue or sound effects or action or visuals or anything. It's just meant just to be good music, right? And when you're scoring a game, I mean, there's so many different other parameters that your music has to sort of check off. It has to do something for people. And even the difference between scoring a game and scoring a film is very, very different as well, in that, the music that you write for a game is meant to encourage people to create some action of some sort, or to do something, or press a button, or get excited about moving on to the next screen or something like that. The music that you write for a film, it's actually meant sort of to do the opposite, sort of to make you sort of sink into the scene more. It sort of enhances the passive experience in a way for watching a scene in a film. So it's all very, very different. I mean, at the end of the day, I think just writing good music is just writing good music, like no matter what you're writing, you can just make it good music. I mean, there are more restraints on the technical side, I think, on the film and the game scoring side. But still, at the end of the day, our job is just to create things that achieve the primary objective of the job, which is to enhance the game, or just to write music that other people want to perform and sing or play in their orchestras. I mean, we're all, we have our tasks ahead of us, no matter what gig it is that we've taken on. So I will say this, I think there's a lot more commonality between being a game composer and being a concert music composer, especially these days, than there is between being a film composer and a concert music composer. Games are largely in sort of like a blank canvas time-wise, right? All I know is I need to write a 3-minute piece of music. It doesn't have to be exactly 3 minutes, as long as it can kind of loop, and I can just kind of create something that's musical that maybe, is sensitive to what's actually going on screen, but there isn't dialogue I have to get around. There isn't like action that I have to hit. There aren't sound effects. I mean, there are sound effects, but they're not timed. In a way, that creative freedom that you get scoring a game is more akin to the creative freedom that you get being commissioned to write a new piece of music. And that's why I think the two sit really hand in hand. But the other reason why is that I think the new home for sort of post-romantic orchestral scoring is more games than it is films now. I mean, outside of a few franchises, which we've all talked about here, like, the Marvel universe and stuff like that, right? A lot of film scoring now is, either quasi-electronic, or it's not meant to be sort of like in that John Williams, James Horner, late romantic era tradition that film scoring was, up until like 2 decades ago, right? But game scores are still very much like that. So I think there's still more of a link between game music and writing for the
content. I couldn't agree more with what you say, Chris, because again, I mean, some of like the biggest project I'm working on, worked before and currently working, the company just tells me, it's night, write something. Seriously, not a lot more than that, because what they want, and I've discovered, because some of the games that I'm working on are so secretive because they're very expected, and how people are all like, I mean, they couldn't really show me anything, and I'm just sometimes astonished. There's something that I wrote that I thought is going to go this way and goes in a total different place of the game. So the fact that they're giving us that freedom of expression and creativity is definitely harder, but also makes the music sound more like wholesome. It has an introduction, has some sort of a development, always has some sort of a climax and an ending, which in movies, many times you cannot really afford doing it. You just need to be glued to the picture.
Yeah, I share exactly the same experience. I started in film 20 years ago, working for Michael Kamen, and I saw the way that the industry shifted exactly as you described, Christopher. And my recent experiences working, I've only ever done 2 video games. But my experience doing those has been creatively very satisfying for all the reasons that you just described. And so I find that a very exciting world to be a part of, and I really am looking forward to being more a part of it.
I'm actually really curious to hear Nami's
my perspective.
Because you are the new generation. We are all old.
Yeah, but actually, everything you're saying is that has been my experience as well. When I work on TV or in a film, there's always this linear timeline that you have to address every little thing that happens, and you're bonded to that. And with a game, it just like it enables you to use your imagination much more, because you get this like animation that is like in some preliminary stage, and you sort of have to understand what's going on, and like sort of a lot of characters are missing, a lot of the encounters with the bad guys that's missing, and so I have to figure it out, like, hey, okay, so yeah, it's stealth, like there's like suspense, okay, this is the exploration part, what am I gonna do? but it does enable to do a longer arc, just like you said, because you can take the theme and actually develop it and you know, kind of work on a specific part of the motif and like, you know, venture into a new thing, or it just provides you with more opportunity musically, which ultimately makes, you know, your viewer, your player more excited, more connected emotionally to the music and to the game. And so yeah, that has totally been my experience as well. And it's fun.
That's awesome.
It's more creative
and
freedom.
Happy composers make good music, right?
Right.
So I mean, that's the thing. Like, you know,
Well, I'm not sure about that. Some great composers were really miserable.
It's fun. It's like that old, you know, happy cows make good milk or whatever, right? It's like happy composers make good music. So, you know,
Right.
it's great. Win-win.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm curious from the panel, and we can actually start with Bobby on this question. But you know, composers, you guys have to play the emotions of what the characters are going through, whether psychologically or what they're acting out on screen. Is it more difficult to connect with a digital character on a video game versus like a real actor in a film or TV show?
Well, for me, no, especially with the Avengers, because they are real people voicing the characters. There's motion capture going on, so it's as if in the early stages I'm scoring animation. I can kind of see. Actually, there's certain scenes where you are scoring actors in the motion capture studio, and you see what they're doing, the headgear, the different contraptions on them that'll later be animated or turned into video game characters. So I don't think it's because there's good writing, good acting, and I think that's what I would focus on. And then also just the way video games look now, they look amazing. You can't, I mean, they come to life. Just the artists are creating just so many beautiful images and like look at behind you, Chandler. I mean, that's beautiful. Like it is. That is evoking a response, and so it's like it's not hard at all. I don't think. Yeah.
I think to take what you're saying a little further, I think that all the characters, the images, the world that you're existing in, but particularly the characters there, it's all allegory. So you know, the point, you know, what's the point in telling the story, you know, and whether we're doing film or video game or theater or ballet, whatever it is you're doing, all of these are narrative. They're all storytelling, and the point of telling stories, which is the oldest of all human art forms, is to impart some kind of information, a moral or some kind of useful story. And so the characters are allegorical for things that are going on in real life, or that have happened in the past, and that we need to share the information with the next generation. So you can, on a human level, you can find a way to connect with the story, with the characters, and what it means to you, and through that express that emotionally in music.
Right. I actually, before approaching Medal of Honor, because it is based on World War II experiences from veterans, what I actually did was to read a couple books that are really telling the story from the point of view of soldiers. Like one of them is D-Day, the other one was Band of Brothers. And so that really helped, you know, understanding their perspective even before I saw the characters, just by reading the screenplay, just by seeing the, you know, very initial visuals. But it really helped to connect with what we're going for in terms of like how it feels to be in World War II, in, you know, behind enemy lines, and what would that person experience. So I think that was good prep.
Yeah, most of the time, I think more than the character, especially in these like big open world games, the situation and the story are dictating way more about what the music will be. The settings, situation, and more than anything else is the story. And to me, I find myself really getting engaged, excited, and even inspired by a good story. And once this good story is being told to me, I don't need to see much. I don't really need to get connected with a physical image in order to think or to come up with something that I think can complement the situation.
So overall, it seems that you all really enjoy working in that video game space. It seems to give you a lot of creative freedom. Nami, I mean, is there a media you prefer, or?
I'm not sure. I love film. Like I have a special love for film, and it's always been a dream to work on film. But having that experience with working on games, I actually love it. So now I'm not sure anymore. And also what Christopher was saying is that yes, video games let you give you that like bigger not bigger, but like the opportunity to write that style of James Horner and Williams and like all these like kind of bigger epic stuff that are not super common in films anymore.
I think that may be a fashion, though. We may find that films turn around again. I think, for me, the each of these things have a different discipline, a different set of things that you have to adhere to in order to get them done. And I enjoy the discipline of writing film music, and I enjoy, there are also disciplines within game music, because your music has to fit within an engine that works in a certain way, and that is a world that's an area that I think is still developing. You guys all know more about games than I do, or have done more games than I have, I think. So I don't know all that much about it, but I'm learning. But I think that's a very interesting area, and I think that if we talk about storytelling and that, I suppose that's what we do. We tell stories through music. Video game is just the most recent iteration of the way that people tell stories. There was film, and before that there was film, and before that there was theater, and but whatever you're doing, the discipline might excite you or not excite you. I like the challenge of all of them.
Yeah, I think that one of the, you could say that it's a problem. Some people maybe won't agree with me. I'm sure producers and director won't agree with me, is that films usually getting temped and computer games never. And this is a big issue for, and that's why sometimes it's just a little harder to cope with a film, as if you're coming as a composer and the film already was temped and the director and producers already totally either in kind of contact, and the worst case scenario already falling in love with what they hear. Obviously they will want to, you as a composer, to get as close as you can to this, which this notion does not really exist in video games.
Yeah, and the problem with that is that at that point, when you're being asked to come close to something else, it becomes less about becomes less of a creative art form and more of a sort of craft discipline. And that's again why I have chosen to do less film, because I'm less interested in craft and more interested in art.
Well, especially, tying that back to our previous conversation about the changing sound of film scores. Nowadays, you're basically wallpapering a scene with music. It's large brushstroke. It's not like you're necessarily trying to be too close to the image in any sort of way. You're just sort of creating a vibe for the scene, and you sort of let the drama play out underneath it. So, I mean, it's just a different set of expectations, I think. If you want to write really fun, adventurous music for films, those types of films, I mean, they're all being scored by Michael Giacchino these days, right? So,
well, the one that Alexander didn't take.
So, Nami, you got the good job.
I guess. Well, yeah, but I mean, again, it really depends on the filmmaker's perspective, and how much are they really wanting your music to not like address important moments in the drama and just let it unfold, because some filmmakers will actually be more traditional and want your music to help tell the story, and from a traditional perspective, like, hey, let's support this moment, and not be a wallpaper. So I think it varies. But yeah, so I hope it's a passion. It's a fashion that goes away, and then I prefer the traditional way of scoring, which does enable you to to be dynamic with the scene, and help tell the story. So yeah.
Can I ask the moderators, mind if I ask a question to the group? Do we think that what we're talking about, the difference between film and video game, might also be because film has been around for really quite a long time now, over 100 years. And that's a long time for the existence of any art form. And when I look at cinema, that we seem to be regurgitating a lot of the things that have come before, whereas video game is very new. And so just inherent in the fact that it's new, it's more open to exploration and to trying new things out. So that makes it a more creative medium to work in. Is that a fair thing to say?
I don't know. I'm working on video games for the last 24 years, I think, or sort of 25. And I don't think that this is the case. I think that the case is the nature of video games, the nature of the people who create, produce video games, is what really makes the big difference. It has to do with a lot of things. It could have to do also with money involved, and budgets and expectations and box office and this kind of thing. But for some reason, the video game creators allow themselves to be more adventurous, groundbreaking, without the fear of going outside the box. I've witnessed it again and again and again in my lifetime. Every time I thought that, this is, oh, wow, it's such a great thing, the next thing was even, more surprising. So I just think that it is the nature of the art form rather than the history. But that's my only take.
I was also going to say, subject matter wise, there's going to be a lot more game properties that are fantasy, World War II, historical, basically franchises built around subject matter that lends itself more to that style of scoring,
Right.
Yeah.
Everybody, I just want to thank you so much for being on this panel with us today for WonderCon. It was really wonderful to hear everything that you had to say about from what timpanis sound like in recordings versus actuality or whatnot, all the way to this amazing topic of kind of the history of film scoring and video game scoring. So I just want to, again, thank you so much. My name is Chandler Poling, and my co-moderator is Natalie Baartz. We forgot to introduce ourselves at the top because we're just so excited to talk to you guys. So with that, I'll wrap us up. Thank you again. If everybody wants to go check out all their games, please do. Don't hesitate to go to your local, whatever, Amazon dealer and make it happen.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody.
Right.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Nice to see you all.